Today, the personal finance content niche is absolutely ginormous. You can't open up YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram without encountering an influencer who gives advice on how to make and save money. Today's guest, Philip Taylor, anticipated this content explosion all the way back in 2011. That's when he launched FinCon, a conference specifically designed for personal finance content creators. That first year, he attracted around 250 attendees, but over the next decade, it grew into the largest conference in this niche, attracting over 3,000 attendees a year. In our interview, Philip walked us through how he got into the personal finance space, his strategy for growing the conference, and his ambitions for launching similar conferences in other niche categories. Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and this is The Business of Content, the show about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. If you want to listen to an audio version of this show, subscribe to The Business of Content wherever you get your podcasts. Before we jump into the interview, I want to talk about how I monetize this show. As you've probably noticed, it doesn't carry any advertising. Instead, it relies entirely on paid subscriptions. A subscription gets you three main benefits. First, it allows you to book a half-hour introductory call with me. It's a great way to pick my brain about challenges you're facing in your own content business. Second, you're able to submit questions to my monthly Q&A series, and I'll answer them on this very show. And finally, a subscription gets you access to premium podcast episodes where I go even deeper on how the world's most successful media entrepreneurs grow their content businesses. Once you subscribe, you're given a custom feed that you can plug into your podcast player of choice. Subscribe at simonowens.substack.com. That's simonowens.substack.com, or just Google the words Simon Owens and newsletter. Okay, let's jump into my interview with Philip. Hey, Philip, thanks for joining us.
Simon, it's great to be here. Big fan of your newsletter, these podcasts you produce, and so it's an honor to be on with you.
Glad to hear it. So we're here to talk about lots of cool stuff you've done as a media entrepreneur, both in the kind of finance blogging space, but then also in the event space. But to start with, I want to just get an idea of your background. So your background in finance originally was that you were a certified public accountant, right?
That's right. Yep. My father's a CPA, and I couldn't avoid it somehow. So I did pretty good on my first accounting exam, and then it was all downhill from there. No, I enjoyed about a 10-year career in finance directly.
Yeah. And what were kind of like some of your early jobs in finance?
So I started out with the Big Four accounting firm, KPMG, worked my way through regional firms, small firms, worked for my dad's firm a bit. Did some public, enjoyed public accounting a little bit, but I was like, yeah, I'm not sure this is for me right now. So I tried corporate finance on the internal audit side. So I did auditing, but basically for one company. That was more of a 9-to-5 role, which I appreciated, and it also allowed me to travel a bit, which was pretty cool. So that was kind of where I hung my hat the last 6 or 7 years of my career. And then about I'd say 2/3 of the way into that is when I sort of started side hustling into blogging and other endeavors.
Yeah, so you started, I think, a blog in 2007 or so. What was kind of the motivation behind that? Like, were you reading blogs at the time? Were you reading personal finance blogs? Did they exist back then?
They did exist since about 03, 04. So I was reading several blogs, and they were just inspiring me to get out there and share my own story. So that was the genesis of it. When you consume for so long, eventually, it's like, okay, well, I have my own thing to start sharing. And so that's kind of where I found myself in 07. Had some more free time at work after the job, and on Saturdays didn't really have a kid yet, so it just felt like it was like a cool thing to experiment with. I had done a little bit of online marketing in college with our band. And so I was comfortable with websites and blogger.com or blogspot.com early on. So I kind of dabbled with the technology and being sort of an internet guy. And then sort of my passion for personal finance kind of collided with that.
And when you say a passion for personal finance, that's different from traditional. You think of finance, like the Bloombergs and Wall Street journals, and then there's personal finance. What's the difference between personal finance and what a lot of us think of when we think of finance content?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't like your CNBC Market Street stuff. I mean, it was definitely getting out of debt, getting ahead for retirement savings, and basically putting myself in a position where I could fast track to financial independence, right? So that's sitting in a corporate cube. I was like, okay, is this it? Is this, here we go, 60-year run? Let's get this going. But so I guess it was partially driven by dissatisfaction with my career, sort of looking for a way out a little bit. And then stumbling upon these people on the internet who talked about things like maxing out your retirement savings, not carrying any, consumer debt at all. I was hearing a little Dave Ramsey at the time too, so I was kind of resonating with some of that message. And yeah, it's definitely within like the personal finance space. So even my accounting degree and my CPA license did really prepare me for everything in terms of managing my money, because I was spending more than I was earning. I had consumer debt hanging around, and it just wasn't going anywhere financially. I wasn't able to kind of out earn my sort of ignorance on the personal finance side. I needed to kind of learn it and sort of hack myself a little bit and use some of these strategies and tools to move myself in a more positive direction financially.
Yeah, and I remember years ago I interviewed the guy who started the Penny Hoarder. His name was like Kyle or Kevin or something like that.
Kyle Taylor,
And
yeah.
yeah, Kyle Taylor. And like his initial version of the Penny Hoarder was just him blogging about, I think he had like massive amount of like college debt or something like that. And it was just him, just a personal blog about all the different side hustles
Yeah.
and little tricks he was trying, and then just writing about that, and that's how he built it up. Was that kind of what you were doing? Like, were you writing it from like a very personal point of view?
Yep, very personal point of view, and I was even using. That's why I go by PT to this day, is because that was my sort of acronym I would go by, so I could be anonymous and share these things, like the exact amount of debt that I had, the exact amount I was trying to save, my salary. I was sharing these things to be instructive for other people, who were kind of going on a similar journey, and so I felt like that transparency, even though I was anonymous, was helpful for the reader, but it was also helping to hold me accountable to where I wanted to go. So yeah, it was a true blog, a web log in that sense, in that I was marking these moments and moving myself from sort of point A to point B, going on this transition. So there was a huge accountability factor to the whole thing. And I really attribute, me jumping into doing the blog similar to the way someone would count calories, keep it in an app, and may not even share it publicly, but track, right? So I was using this to sort of track my progress, and it helped to kind of hold me to that standard and keep moving forward, and gamified it, I guess, to a degree.
And was it called Part Time Money from the very beginning?
The initial run of it was, I believe, Primetime Money. So nickname for me in high school, we all liked Deion Sanders Primetime, and I was PT, and so they all called me Primetime occasionally. And so I just started with Primetime Money, but I went with the short URL of just ptmoney.com, because I guess I knew enough to know, keep the URL short. Through the years, it's iterated. People just started calling me PT Money, and so I just shortened it to PT Money for a while. And then I would say over the last 5 years, I made the transition to Part-Time Money. I like that because I sort of landed, all my topics have eventually started landing on entrepreneurship, real estate, side hustling, things you could sort of do outside of your traditional employment to kind of further yourself moving forward. It mirrored my story of becoming a blogger on the side, and so that's kind of the name that sort of stuck long term with the blog.
And like, what's a hypothetical blog post? Like, I opened this kind of special savings account, and this is my experience, or like, what was it like?
Yeah, it's evolved through the years. I mean, I gave myself permission to write about a broad array of topics, and I sort of credit that with allowing me to stick with it for a long time early on. But yeah, what you mentioned, sort of how to get started savings. Here's good checking accounts to chase, or savings accounts to chase to get higher interest rates. Here's side hustle ideas you could start. Here's how I personally started in real estate. I sort of shared my journey of becoming an accidental landlord. I also share my journey of starting FinCon and sort of getting into that business. So just one part, sort of what's working for me, and then sort of the articles that probably make sense around that. Like once I wrote the article, for instance, how I turned my home into a rental property, then I started thinking about all the questions people might have around that topic, and so I wrote articles, sort of helping that person in a complete sense, still adding my personal anecdotes, but it all riffs off that initial initial experience that I had.
And how long did it take you before you started looking at your analytics and seeing at least some sort of audience?
Yeah, I would say it was about a year. So I started in '07, and then at the beginning of '08, I actually moved it to WordPress. And so I got more control over the site and just started basically treating it a little more professionally. And I would say that first 4 months of that year, I was interacting with a lot of other bloggers by that point, and we were sharing ideas as to how to kind of grow what we were doing. And that 4 months really was instructive. And I think by April of 2008, so that would have been about a year since I started it, was when I got my first AdSense check from Google. It was like $120 or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was kind of like the golden age of AdSense where you could like embed the code, and then there would be these text ads, and most of the money I think the clicks came from Google searches where they landed on your page, didn't find what they wanted, but the Google ad itself, the text ad, gave them what they wanted. They would click on that, and then you'd get like a little bit of payment.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah. Or I talked to them about how to get started savings, but then the savings account ad was right there, perfect. So yeah, and I could sort of feel it growing early. And you're right. It was a golden age where you sort of put another article into the tank, so to speak, and you feel it rise up. And everything sort of was a little bit of an easy button back then.
Yeah, and was it most of it was just Google kind of drive-by traffic of people looking to solve particular issues? Did you feel like you had some kind of ongoing readership?
I had a small ongoing readership, people who would email and comment. My comments were open back then, and so I had some interaction there. But to be honest with you, it was mostly Google search driven. They're just at the time it was a supply and demand issue. I mean, Google needed to serve up answers, and the only people really answering them in this way were bloggers out there. And so as soon as we would put up another answer, Google would send people asking those questions, to our pages. And so that was where the majority of it came. I realized I really enjoyed the interaction with the other bloggers more so than I necessarily did the end user. So I sort of started geeking out on the idea of being a blogger and how to optimize that, what it takes to do it properly. And so that's, ultimately led me to FinCon. But, that was sort of, I was better at the networking and colleague side than I was sort of the end user side.
And it was just like I was blogging back then. It was really hard to build a recurring audience because the blogs that did, they were the ones who published like 20 times a day, and both you and I had full-time jobs back then. So there would, there'd be some weeks where we would blog a lot, and then some weeks, I'm sure same was for you where you wouldn't blog at all. And the main way that people became regular readers of blogs was by bookmarking the sites. And so if you didn't have content there every single day, then they didn't build a habit out of it. And then, it was just really hard to build like a regular readership if you weren't, posting at least once a day, if not like 5 times a day or something like that.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. The most prolific and the most subscribed to ones were most active for sure. And I wasn't a natural writer, so it was really a challenge for me to be creating this content. It was lucky I had this passion, and I was also reading so many other blogs that it was easy for me to sort of take their ideas and riff off of them or add my own take. And so by being immersed in the community, that's the only way I could sort of get it done. But I mean, it was a struggle to get 400 words, onto a blog post. And I kind of laugh at that now because the writing process is a lot easier for me. I learned a lot, but early on it was a struggle to communicate my thoughts and ideas onto the blog. So.
And was the blog was it ever generating like significant income itself, or was it all just kind of side hustle money?
No, it was definitely significant. I would say in January of 2010, it reached to about 2/3 of my corporate salary, and that's when I started seriously considering, jumping to do it full time. By the end of that year, by then I had also added on affiliate marketing and services. So I was also a freelance writer and editor. So I was doing some editing for some blogs that were run by banks. I was doing some freelance writing, but the affiliate marketing component was probably the biggest piece at that point, and it had the biggest trajectory. So,
And what were you like recommending, like financial products or something like that?
anything from a checking account, savings account, insurance, brokerages. So started investing, and then we started dabbling in cards, credit cards, rewards cards, travel cards, and that was where, just to be totally frank, I mean, that was where the big dollars were.
And is that like Amazon, where you just go on and you just create an account and grab an affiliate fee, or do you have to have relationships in order to do that?
Back then it was a lot more open where you could do that. But the issuers with credit, it's a highly regulated industry. And so the issuers wanted to be careful with the messaging that was going out from blogs, because they couldn't necessarily control it. And so they started slow playing the relationships around that time, 2010, 2011, but you could still go through a network and get most of those relationships. Especially then, if you started showing progress, then you could start getting access to other programs like Chase and Amex. But it was pretty easy to get into Discover. What else? Yeah, Capital One. I feel like, but those are fairly easy to get into early back in the day. Literally just signing up, getting a link up on your site.
And you mentioned that you were kind of networking behind the scenes with a lot. Was it just like email, like just emailing with them, or like what was
Yeah, we had a forum, the Money Blogger forums or something like that. That Jim Wang who's now at Wallet Hacks. Jim's an early pioneer in the space and someone I read for a long time before I even got started. But he had created a forum online where all of us bloggers could kind of talk, shop, and network. And that was the beginnings of, sort of this little industry that ultimately we started creating, was just this little forum.
And so then how did that lead to the creation of FinCon? Because I imagine like, I'm very into, like, people are like, oh, you should throw an event. I'm very intimidated by the idea of an event, because like I feel like there's a lot of upfront capital, investment involved, and there's just like so many moving parts. I think the stress would kind of undo me if I were doing that by myself. What was it like for you back then?
Yeah, so for me, it was definitely not something I had a lot of experience in. Had I not been driven by this community that I could tell wanted to be together, this group of bloggers that, through the interactions in the forums, commenting on each other's sites, and just sort of getting to know the blogosphere, I had confidence in them. I had confidence in this handful of people, this group of people that I knew were colleagues, were working together, were supporting each other. And so that gave me a lot of confidence to do it. I had been going to some other conferences, general blogging conferences, Blog World Expo, some of the WordPress conferences that they were putting on. And coming home from those, Affiliate Summit was another one I went to. And coming home from those, I always felt like, oh, we need our own space. Because when I would go to those events, I would meet in the hallways with, other finance bloggers. And I found myself just wanting to spend more and more time with them. So it became evident that there was enough energy around this particular niche within the event space that it could support its own thing. And so I think I read an article in January of 2011. So this would have been a year after I had gone full time as a blogger. Said something like 2011 will be the year of the niche blogging conferences. How about that for like a sign from heaven that like I needed to do this, Read that, and I remember I was actually maybe even reading it at bed at night, and I was just like, babe, telling my wife, I was like, I feel like I just need to do this. This is like a moment where I need to take action. So got up out of the bed that night, went and registered the domain. What was the domain? financialbloggerconference.com or something like that. And started building out the website immediately. So the way I got confidence, though, from the community was I put up an email. Two things: I put up an email list sign up form on that page, and I message everyone in the forum or put a post in the forum saying, hey, I'm going to do this thing. If you're interested, sign up. So instantly, I think I had 100 people on the list, that had gone to the website and signed up and showed interest. I also put, back in the day, there were these Facebook like boxes.
So there was no information for an upcoming conference. It was just like at this point, it was just kind of wish casting of like, here's a landing page. I want to do this in the future. Sign up if you want to be notified once we have something.
Yeah. I hadn't read the Lean Startup book, but apparently I totally used the Lean Startup method to create the conference, where I just tapped into the community of people and completely, said a raise of hands, who wants to, kind of help me do this thing and start this thing. And once they started signing up on the email list and showing that they were interested, I just started engaging with them. We picked the location, we picked the date, we picked the format, the speakers. We sort of all did it together in a survey-based. I think I used SurveyMonkey back in the day to sort of solicit information, and that in combination with the forums was sort of how I switchboarded building this thing, all the ideas behind it. Yeah,
and that the first place you landed on was Chicago, right?
Yep, in Chicago, and that would have been fall of 2011.
Yeah, and so what kind of venue did you get?
So, to be honest, I wanted downtown Chicago, like some cool hotel down there. I like the idea of a hotel because, we weren't going to require a lot of meeting space, and I sort of like the idea of all of us being together throughout the whole 24-hour cycle, so that we could hang out in the hallways, have breakfast together, have meals together, be at the bar, kind of facilitate this community. Ultimately, I worked with a company called Helms Briscoe, and I would highly recommend them. They're a sourcing provider. They work for you as the event planner for free. They get paid a commission by the hotels once they ultimately sign you up on a contract with the hotel. So they helped me locate different hotels in the Chicago area, and we settled on a suburb of Chicago in Schaumburg, and I think it was the Hilton or the Hyatt. I forget what property it was there in Schaumburg, Illinois, but they had a great meeting space for us. Had great hotel rate to keep it very affordable for our attendees, and to be honest, it wasn't that far from the airport either. So I would highly recommend Helms Briscoe for that. And then I had some friends from. Go ahead.
What kind of upfront investment was that? I don't know how this works. Was the hotel like,
sure,
just you can pay us based on how many tickets and hotel rooms
right,
you book, or did you have to pay something in advance, or was there some kind of minimum guarantee, or what was that?
Right. Yeah, so the way I managed the risk of it all was in two parts. Well, for one, I created in my mind, a budget for Conference A and a budget for Conference B, right? And so I said, if we sell this many tickets, then we'll think about doing Conference B. But for now, let's be safe and conservative and do Conference A. The agreement with the hotel did not change necessarily based on that, but my agreement was definitely based on Conference A. And so I forget, it was somewhere around 100, 150 people that I was shooting for. The hotel agreements for events, if you rent their space, typically they'll give you the space for free as long as you commit to two things: meeting a certain room block, so a set amount of people booking rooms there for the event, and then commit to a certain amount of food and beverage spend. So I think my food and beverage spend might have been 10 or 15,000, and then I think I committed to 50 rooms a night or something like that. So it was a very simple, small agreement. But because this was where this hotel was, and the space they had, the math worked out for them, and they took a chance on me. And so that's what we were committed.
So it wasn't much upfront investment. It sounds like 15,000 plus you'd be on the hook if you didn't fill those 50 rooms.
That's it. Yep. That was the commitment. Yeah. And so there was a moment where, I said, okay, here we are. I'm committed to this, but by that point I had even sold tickets, or it all happened so fast. But I had reached a level of comfort with the commitment from the attendees, and even partners were reaching out to me at that point. People who I was working with on the blog had sort of caught wind of it, or I had reached out to them, and so I knew they had some interest in being there, a part of it as well. So it sort of felt like I was comfortable making that commitment. And then ultimately I knew I still had 6 months to plan it, and I'd figure something out.
Yeah. And was the initial version, was it just a 1 day of programming?
No, it was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it was 2.5 days actually. Yeah. So we once we sort of settled on the dates and the place, we started working on the schedule, and a lot of people wanted to share. A lot of people wanted to bring their knowledge to the community, and I certainly wanted to have time for like meals together and parties, and have exhibits there so people could meet with the brands and set up deals. I wanted to be a business conference, so I wanted to allow plenty of time for that. So, 2.5 days.
Yeah.
And it ended up being about 200 people is what we ended up with, 225 people.
Yeah, and the internet in 2011 was very different than today. Like, especially when we'll talk about this, why the personal finance space in the creator economy has gotten so freaking huge. But YouTube, there weren't like many full-time YouTubers back then. Podcasting was tiny compared to then. I'm guessing most of the people who were coming were bloggers, because that was kind of
Yep.
that was kind of a lot of the creator economy back in 2011 were just bloggers. Like what was kind of the focus of that, the main kind of thrust of the first conference? Like, what kind of programming or things were you educating people about?
I told you my passion, which was for the subject of actually creating this content and marketing it and getting it out there to audiences. So that's where sort of my interest lied, but I was open to working with the community to see what programming they wanted. So in the survey, the things that definitely bubbled up were the business topics of how to create your blog, how to make better content, how to get it in front of more people, and then how to monetize it. There was some interest on the personal finance side as well, specifically for topics that were sort of perceived as cutting edge or maybe more technical. And so we did make way for true personal finance topics being talked about at the event as well. But there was no interest in coming together to sit around and talk about the best way to budget, or, how to get out of debt, or, cause we were all at that point, experts on those topics. And so it didn't make sense to necessarily, drill down into a lot of them. We just wanted to talk shop. And so that's what we ended up doing at the event was that. And you're right, there weren't, I think there might have been like one or two people there who were comfortable with YouTube by that point, who were doing stuff. There were a handful of podcasters that were going at that point. But I had named the event the Blogger Conference, right? And so I, initially had committed to it. But by the time we got to the event, I realized it was a bigger idea even than blogging. And so I felt like the blogging term was handicapping the event already from the beginning. And so I immediately just shortened the event's name to FinCon after that first year, and said, you know what, we're just going to go by FinCon because this encompasses more than blogging, and it's sort of this bigger idea. So I stopped using the blogging term even after the first year.
And who were the initial sponsors? Was it like the companies that were selling these financial products that you were doing the affiliate deals with and stuff like that?
That's it. Yeah. Budgeting companies, banks, cards, and then some of the networks would come as well and work with us. Bankrate had a small network. Yeah. Affiliate networks. So like CJ.com, Impact.com, the companies who work between the brands and the creators.
So if you're a bank, your motivation for sponsoring or being a sponsor back then was like, I want these bloggers to start recommending my products to their readerships or something like that.
100%. Yep.
Yeah, and I want to get them in a session or a 1-to-1 where I can talk about all the money they can earn by recommending my products.
Yeah, and there's also a little thought leadership. They know they're in a room of people who are passionate about helping the end user move toward a better positive financial place. And so they want to position themselves and what they have to offer within that conversation too. So I would say that's their, higher level goal for being there as well. But there's certainly a transactional reason to be there.
So 50 people was the minimum you needed. You got 200. It sounds like it was a smashing success. How did that change your life after that first year? Like, was it like, you know, you know, before you maybe thought it was the blog was your career? Was after that, do you decide, no, actually, really, it's the conference that's my career? Or like, what was kind of the mindset shift after that?
It was one of the most challenging things and rewarding things I'd ever done. So I was completely worn out and exhausted from the experience. I didn't make a lot of money. I want to say I made 20, 30,000 off of it, which for a first year event, I guess is not bad. At the time, it was good additional money to have. But I knew it would be a long road to, build it to a point to where it was its own standalone business. Luckily, my blog was doing very well at the time. And that year after FinCon was the best year I ever had with the blog. And I completely attribute it to having been the guy who ran the conference. Because at the time, I was sort of a B-level blogger within the community. Everyone sort of knew me, but I hadn't been around as long as most, and I certainly wasn't as prolific or as effective as some of the others. But it catapulted me into a place where my blog was, I guess, more respected and more known, and just it put me in a pivotal position, I guess, within the community. So I was blessed to have that. It was.
Did you change? Well, did you change the blog at all after that in terms of your strategy, or were you just still doing more of the same stuff?
I did a little. Actually, I probably got more personal with the blog, and started doing like income reports and get out of debt reports. So I actually tried to pour more into it for the end user, and it was taking off. So it was becoming, it was becoming very successful financially, and so I was happy I had done the conference, and I said, we're going to do it again, even though I didn't know where or when. So yeah, I left the first conference having no plan for the second one, but that's mostly because I was having so much success with the blog. The conference was an aside, and it was like, okay, that'll be gravy if we do it again. But this, I've got to sort of ride the horse that's running the fastest right now, and that was the blog. In terms of content changing, yeah, I mean, I just tried to get better. The event certainly inspired me. Seeing and talking with so many others up close, sort of seeing where our industry was going. And I just wanted to be better. I wanted to be a better model. If I was having more eyeballs on my content, I wanted to be better,
So how did that was 2011 when you had the first conference. I was actually at the most recent one in New Orleans in 2023, so it's obviously an ongoing concern. How did the conference evolve over the years, especially as all kinds of things with the internet change in terms of how media, the big social media platforms becoming a huge driver of traffic and then receding, the rise of YouTube, podcasts becoming super popular, then TikTok, personal finance TikTok. Like, I'm assuming that that entire world is much bigger today than it was when you first started it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there are a lot more players, and it's moved more toward video. And the social channels, absolutely. So, back early days of the internet, I mean, blogs were where the conversation was happening. It was where we were commenting, and it was social, and so certainly even in 2012, 2013, we started seeing the move to podcasting as a secondary medium, as well as social media being a great bolt-on for additional traffic. Traffic from Twitter was very easy early on. People were using that to kind of broadcast what they were doing on their blogs. Podcasting came on strong. Like I said, I remember going to my first podcast movement conference. It was a year or two after the first FinCon. And I felt like that was the area we needed to push into, especially for the finance space, because podcasting was a safe place for people to listen and take financial advice without sort of feeling exposed. And so I leaned heavily into podcasting initially, and then by 16, 17, YouTube started coming on strong, and we started catering more toward that. So we developed specific tracks, I think, at some point for blogging, YouTube, podcasting, and went directly at those channels and tried to market specifically the event and the programming built around those models. The creator services companies that popped up, email marketing companies, podcast software, YouTube editors, sort of they started coming into the space and working with us to directly find those folks. And by 2019, we had reached 3,000 people with the event. That was our high water mark pre-COVID.
3,000 people went to the event.
Yep.
Wow.
And by that point, it had become much more of a celebration of like personal finance and financial independence and the industry that supports that than just this little blogging conference. So we had tons of topics, financial topics. We had Graham Stephan was there from the YouTube space. Your big Ramit Sethi was there from the blog authorship space. I mean, we had reached kind of a pinnacle point with it. And I always felt like it had become this like festival, of personal finance to a degree. Even though the consumers weren't there by and large, they were starting to come because it was celebrating this bigger idea of helping people move toward a positive place financially.
So there were people who were coming who weren't content creators who just were interested in personal finance.
Yeah, and I would say the FIRE movement helped to propel that a lot because they were getting so much attention and they really didn't have a home as a community at that point. And we had Mr. Money Mustache coming to the event. Lots of other FIRE bloggers that were very popular at the time would come. And so
what is a FIRE blogger?
Oh, sorry. Financial Independence Retire Early. That was a big subgenre within the personal finance education space that consumers are very attracted to. And so they used our event as a way to come together as well. And now they have their own event. And so they don't necessarily come to our show anymore for that. But in the early days, they were sort of using it as that.
Yeah. So then the pandemic happens, and obviously you're running a live events conference, so not great for live events. But on the other side, there were two things that happened with the pandemic: an explosion of entrepreneurship, and then an explosion of the creator economy. So now it's just, I feel like the personal finance and finance in general, the creator, that section of the creator economy is bigger than ever. So I guess like obviously there was the initial pandemic when you couldn't have live events. Did you just take a year off, or did you try to do like an online version of it?
Yeah. So our event was in the fall. And so I don't know if you remember with 2020, there was this, sort of big is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? So there was this big waiting game we played all year. Ultimately, late summer, we had to pull the trigger on canceling it. We did not try to replicate it online, but we did offer an online event that December that I think we called FinCon X or something like that, where we brought some people to Dallas in a safe space and recorded did sort of a live version of FinCon for people that way. And then the next year was in 2021. That was in Austin. So we benefited that year from having till the fall to produce it. And so 2021 we were back in force in Austin, and we chose Texas because at that point they were a little more maybe open than other states, and so we could more confidently produce an event there. So we're in the convention center in 2021 in Austin there. But yeah, it was certainly yep.
I was going to say, like, up until then, like, was the conference producing a lot of digital content, year round or anything like that? Or was it mainly just like a place for like the in-person experience only?
We had a very strong Facebook group that kept the community connected. So after that forum, that forum sort of moved on to the Facebook group, probably 2013-ish. And then that Facebook group continued to grow and be a really strong house for the community's connection throughout the year. We we supported the community with a newsletter regularly, and we produce our own content. Yes, independent of the conference, and up until 2019, 2020, we were doing all that stuff. We need to get back there. We're not doing as much of that these days, but in 2021, we just needed to focus on getting the event back. And so all our marketing and everything's centered around the event. And to be honest, we just kind of stayed in that zone for a while. But we need to get back to being a better content creator and community supporter for sure.
Yeah. And so 2021, I'm guessing people still were a little bit skittish, about
Yep.
live events, but going into 2022, 2023, given how big the creator economy got, has it come like completely roaring back, or what's kind of the state of now versus pre-pandemic?
To be totally honest, we thought it would. And so I started investing post 2021 back into the event, hiring additional employees, doing more marketing, trying to make the event better with better AV and production on site. But we haven't come roaring back for some reason. And that may have been because of my lack of investment in the community aspect of the event online, or lack of content, changing behaviors from advertisers. To be honest, it's a mystery to me, Simon. But we've remained flat since 22. And I agree with you that the creator economy does appear to be growing holistically. And if you go to Vid Summit, I'm wearing my Vid Summit t-shirt, that event's growing. But for some reason, FinCon, we had a year last year where we just saw sort of flat growth, and it's kind of a mystery to me. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure. We certainly put forth programming that caters to new creators, focuses on new platforms, features guests that are doing well on those platforms. We have struggled to get advertisers back. So big banks, big brokers, big insurance companies, they're not back like they were with us in 2019. And I'm not sure if just their focus has changed, if they're not, if they're going direct to influencers or creators, or if they feel like, they don't necessarily need an event as a platform to do that. But stuff we're working on, stuff we're trying to figure out. But yeah, man, I don't have a good answer there. It's kind of a mystery to me. We have a great community. Not to say that the people that show up aren't amazing, and we have great speakers, but we have not necessarily benefited from what feels like, I agree with you, a boom in the creator space.
And so are you thinking any differently for 2024 in terms of programming, or like what's kind of your thinking on how you can kind of address that?
Yeah. So two things. We want to engage more with the community. So Facebook for us has fallen off to a degree where we just feel like it's not serviceable, and so we're moving to an alternative platform for our community. So we're moving off of Facebook, and we'll be opening up a school, SKOOL.com school, where our community can interact with on a regular basis. In addition to that, we're going to be reintroducing a newsletter that connects and educates the financial creator community on a regular basis. And so those two things we're hanging our hat on. We'll probably be at Vid Summit, sort of representing the financial creator space there, doing more there. We're certainly on the socials. Working hard to get better brands there, because I think if we can get the bigger brands there that are working with creators, then more creators will come because they want to meet them in person and set up deals, do business. And so events are about gathering the tribe to a certain degree. And so we've just got to do a good job of sort of recruiting that tribe and getting them there.
So how has your personal career in life changed over the years in terms of like I was on the website for part-time money. It looked like you hadn't published since like late 2023. Maybe I was looking on the wrong part of the website, but like as a content creator yourself, like
Yeah.
are you still producing stuff under your own brand, or are you mainly focused on the conference now? I saw you also, it looks like you're working on another conference called like TravelCon. Like what's your kind of day to
Yep.
day now?
Yep. So I have a great events team who produces FinCon and has on their own for the past 4 or 5 years. So during COVID, I sort of took a sabbatical, and my team, who's been with me from the start, really knows how to produce and run the event. And so I left it to them for a year and a half to produce it during that time frame. They did a tremendous job producing that. I took a little time off the blog as well. And you're right. Last year was a big year for acquisition for me. So the event TravelCon was one that was started pre-pandemic but closed after pandemic. It's similar to FinCon in that it's for creators, but instead of the finance space, it's in the travel space. And so I spoke with the previous owner last summer and decided that I would make an acquisition of that brand. And so we acquired TravelCon, and then my excellent event team, I charged them with producing both events every year instead of just the one. So they'll do TravelCon in the spring, which we just had last week, and we will have FinCon every fall. For context, for TravelCon, it was about 500 travel creators showed up with us there in Portland. Had a fantastic week, and we're looking to grow that event now into the future. So, yeah, we've got the two events going. Personally, I don't blog as much. You picked up on it. You're right. I'd love to do more. I just haven't made time, or I don't have a staff there to help me produce anything. So, I'm also a CPA still, and my father retired our family accounting practice last year. And instead of selling it or selling it to the staff or a third party, we chose to keep it within the family. And so, being the CPA in the family, I'm charged with running that as well. So I'm also working on that as an additional side project. But the idea being to eventually integrate, all the businesses, and us becoming a CPA firm that serves content creators. So yeah, a lot going on right now. I feel yeah.
So the clientele that would hire the firm would be actual, like you would have like a degree of specialization of like you specifically what you do, their finances, their taxes, or like what would you be doing for them?
Bookkeeping and tax, and oftentimes they might need an S corp established or set up, maybe a solo 401k retirement plan, things like that. So basically, the things that I went through as a creator that are needed on the finance and accounting side to properly establish yourself and set yourself up for success. Our firm would work with creators to do that for them. So.
And what is your ambition for like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Do you want to become like an Informa, like where you're running an entire, a whole bunch of conferences and you're acquiring more and more conferences? Do you want to focus more on just growing your dad's former business? Like what's the kind of the main focus going forward?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to do, it's hard to do a lot of things at once for sure. But I feel like I'm in a sweet spot. I'm in a good position with the assets that I have, if you want to look at them that way. Continue growing them. I would not mind. I would not be opposed to an additional creator niche conference. We're positioned very well to acquire another one. And so I would be looking for that maybe in the health space, or maybe, maybe in the food space. There's plenty of creators in both those spaces. So potentially a third event, but for right now, we're content with just growing the two. And then the CPA firm integration we expect to happen later this year. I would love to sell to an Informa down the road, and position what I have to offer to them down the road. We're still a ways off from that. I was close in 2019. And then sort of I've kind of told you the story there, but so I'd love an acquisition down the road for sure, Simon. We're open to that, and then I could see myself maybe just running the firm and then maybe getting back to blogging. Who knows? But I'm in a sweet spot. I took my own medicine as a finance blogger and moved myself toward a place of financial independence and freedom. And so, I've been a benefit of a lot of choice and freedom in my life. And now I get to sort of share that with the team and help move these ideas forward. So it's an exciting time. It's challenging because I have a lot on my plate, I feel like, but I'm excited for the future.
Okay, Philip, those were all the questions I have for you. Where can people find you online?
Yep. You mentioned ptmoney.com. That's a great place. Email me at pt@ptmoney.com. I'm also on LinkedIn under PT Money. And that's probably my most active social channel. So
awesome. Well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me on, Simon.